One of the passengers speaks of how he wishes he had his 40, which is often the language referencing a gun. It is the goal, and it will always be the goal of the Raleigh Police Department and all of its members to protect and serve the public in a safe and courteous and professional manner. We will always strive to meet those standards on a daily basis. We work hard and we will continue to work hard to learn best practices, to make corrections where necessary, and to accept responsibility as appropriate. Policing requires the help and cooperation of all of us, all of you, the people who work and live and visit this great city. No officer wants to use force or become involved in a deadly force encounter. It is so much more than simply complying and complaining. It is about relationships. It is about building rapport. It is about having mutual respect for each other. And that is everyone's responsibility in our community. It works both ways. Instructions are going to be given, and at times commands are going to be given. The fluidity and other circumstances evolving will sometimes dictate those actions. Recognizing the mutual responsibility that we all have is so important, and it will often dictate the outcome. Not every encounter requires the use of force. In fact, the vast majority of our encounters do not. Those situations where officers are required to use force often involve making an arrest, preventing the escape, or protecting themselves or a third person from harm. While often it may appear that this is a matter of police and the person involved in the incident, I could not speak to this matter today without speaking specifically about the victims in both of these incidents. My thoughts and prayers are with them as well. They called 911 because they needed police assistance. They were afraid. From carjackings to having their vehicles struck twice. Their experiences are traumatic. And one of the victims of these vehicle incidents has told us that he encountered a motorist who has videotaped, or who had videotaped, the erratic driving that had occurred prior to the incident on Navajo Drive. I am asking that person and any other persons who witnessed that driving and videotaped or had information to please share that with us. I ask you to understand and respect that law enforcement is a dangerous profession. Officers frequently encounter volatile situations that evolve rapidly and may involve dangerous and armed individuals. When given a command or direction by an officer, please follow it. Both of these incidents in the videos released today could have possibly been avoided if the individuals had complied and cooperated with any one of the multiple demands given by those officers. In full transparency, and I repeat this as I often have, if anyone believes that they have been treated unfairly, unprofessionally, or inappropriately by any member of the Raleigh Police Department, I do ask that you contact our office and make us aware of it. But I also offer a plea to the community today. Once again, we have 2 men of color between the ages of 18 and 22 involved in these 2 critical incidents. Let us begin to truly ask ourselves, in 2020, what is happening in our community that gets us to this place? that gets us to this type of encounter to begin with. Let us stop for a moment. Let all of us stop for a moment to recognize that enough is enough. Contrary to simply recording the incident, compliance and cooperation are so important during these types of encounters. And high-risk situations put us all in harm's way, officers and the community. Unfortunately, officers are having to respond to these types of situations more and more often. And these types of calls are dangerous. It cannot be okay. And in this city where I have served, it cannot be okay for any of us to think that this type of behavior is conducive for easy encounters when cooperation is not occurring. In both of those situations, as I mentioned, they're difficult to watch. And I think you have to ask, to begin with, again, how do we get there? How do we get to the traffic stop? How do we get to the man with the gun call to begin with? And recognizing that our greater goal always has to be to bring that to a peaceful resolve. That's the greater goal. Does it always happen that way? We know that it doesn't. It's concerning to me. And I've brought this issue up several times in reference to our community. Our city's better than this. But it takes all of us, law enforcement and the greater community, to work through these situations.
Chief, what do you believe the body camera video should say to the public?
The body-worn camera and the in-car cameras, they capture the vast majority of what occurred. But they don't always capture everything. And even with the cameras, there's always more to the story. And this is why investigations are so important. The investigation affords us to literally take piece by piece by piece of this investigation, like a puzzle, if you will, and bring all those pieces together to then discern and figure out exactly what we've got, how it happened, what happened before the 911 call was ever made. And what it also, the rest of the story then allows us to make sure that there's an opportunity to make sure that resources are provided for those people who were traumatized in the process.
Chief, activists who are defending Braily Batista-Concepcion say that officers need more training when it comes to racial equity and de-escalation. Do you think that they do need more training on that?
I think there's always an opportunity for increased training. And I would say to you that the Raleigh Police Department trains a lot. And not only does it start in the very basic element of police training, we double what the state requires of any law enforcement officer in the state of North Carolina. So the emphasis on training starts on day one with our recruits. And throughout the year, we not only accept what the state requires that we have, but training is always coming. And it's coming in more than just racial training or the use of force training and de-escalation, but it's also putting our officers in reality-based scenarios, scenario-based training, where then you get to infuse the racial equity piece. You then get to infuse the de-escalation piece, and recognizing that not every situation requires any more than de-escalation. Not every situation requires anything more than that. And so it's important that we put our officers in critical thinking scenarios to ensure that they can have the exposure in a controlled environment, so that when they are faced with circumstances, that they can best handle them in the proper manner. And when that doesn't happen, we investigate those situations and we determine what the next step is and what is necessary going forward as well.
Chief, do you see any issues with how the arrest was handled?
I see issues with the entire scenario altogether. There again, what gets us there, the specifics with the investigation, I can't talk to that. But we see everything that you see. And so we have to look at the totality of those circumstances on both of those incidents. And then we then discern what the next steps are in moving forward.
The community activists have argued that police should need to use that kind of force in a traffic stop scenario. What would your response be?
I believe I too saw the press conference. And I believe that one offered a taser. And others have even asked, why didn't you spray that person? You have to take each one of those situations on its own merit. And here's why. That vehicle weighs about 3,000 pounds. It actually weighs a little more than that. When you spray that driver, or you tase that driver, you have the potential to create a 3,000-pound weapon. And that piece, it's difficult for us to control. And if you look at that video prior to the traffic stop, you'll notice that he almost struck another car head on. But we're also talking about an individual who was driving a vehicle that had already been involved in 3 separate crashes. We have to be deliberate when we apply those other applications of force.
Did officers violate policy in either of these incidents?
That's why we have an investigation, so that we can evaluate the totality of their actions, the circumstances as well, and then we take our facts and findings to the district attorney.
Chief, what in that video disturbs you the most?
There are a number of things that disturb me. One, though, is the people in that vehicle. You have juveniles in that vehicle. To see the rest of the other pieces to this that are not necessarily a part of that traffic stop. We are fortunate as a city today that the majority of the incidents prior to that traffic stop are property damage incidents and not harm to individuals. One more question.
Yeah, we're going to take one more question.
How would that kind of stop typically be handled? How do you feel those stops should be handled? Could you give a play-by-play of the way that would go?
I cannot, and the reason being is because traffic stops, obviously you know that the vehicle gets stopped, but the encounter and the circumstances that lead up to that traffic stop are very different, and those officers have to consider all of the information that they get before the traffic stop is ever made. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming out and your support of the Raleigh Police Department and our efforts to do well in serving and protecting the community are appreciated. Thank you.